3 days had passed since the rescue from Kepler Station. The human medical ship Soul Pride moved quietly through space, carrying wounded soldiers and civilians from the latest battle. Tai Wu found himself walking to the medical bay every morning. And every evening to check on Hana, she was getting stronger. Her body was healing from the terrible wounds, but everyone knew her arms would never grow back. Villani people were not like some other species who could regenerate lost limbs. Once something was gone, it stayed gone. Dr. Li Min-jung was the best medical officer in the human fleet. She had saved thousands of lives during the war, but even she could not work miracles. When Tai Wu asked her about prosthetic arms for Hana, the doctor just shook her head sadly. "We have tried everything," she said. "The prosthetics we make for humans will not work on Villani nervous systems. Their brain patterns are completely different from ours. The signals that control artificial limbs just cannot connect." Properly, Tai Wu watched through the medical bay window as Hana tried to eat breakfast. A kind nurse was helping her, bringing small spoonfuls of food to her mouth. Hana smiled and thanked the nurse in her musical voice, but Tai Wu could see the sadness in her golden eyes. She had told him more about her life in the past few days. Before the war, she lived on a beautiful planet called Velan Prime. Her people were famous throughout the galaxy for their incredible art. Hana had been working on a sculpture series that told the story of the first contact between different alien species. It was going to be her masterpiece. Now she could not even feed herself. The worst part was that Hana never complained. She learned human words faster than any alien Tai Wu had ever met. She tried to help other patients by talking to them and keeping them company. She even attempted to organize the medical supplies using only her feet and her mouth. But late at night, when she thought everyone was asleep, Tai Wu sometimes heard her crying very quietly into her pillow. Other patients in the medical bay had lost limbs too. There was a Centauri trader who had lost his leg and a human marine who was missing 3 fingers. All of them received prosthetic replacements that worked perfectly. But for Hana, there was nothing. The unfairness of it ate at Tai Wu like acid. Every species in the galaxy had developed prosthetic technology that worked for their own people, but nobody had ever tried to make prosthetics that could work across species. The biological differences were just too great, at least that was what everyone believed. On the 3rd night, Tai Wu sat beside Hana's bed while she slept peacefully. His own prosthetic left arm hummed quietly, as its internal systems ran diagnostics. He had lost his original arm 2 years ago in a battle against Sec forces. The replacement was military-grade, top-of-the-line technology that connected directly to his nervous system. He could control it just like his real arm. He could feel things through its sensors. He could even feel pain if something damaged it. The artificial limb was so advanced that sometimes he forgot. It was not his original flesh and bone. Tai Wu looked at his sleeping friend and made a decision that would have seemed impossible to anyone else. The next morning, he found Dr. Li in her office drinking coffee and reviewing patient charts. She looked up when he entered and immediately noticed his serious expression. "Doctor, I want to give my prosthetic arm to Hana," he said, without any introduction. Li nearly dropped her coffee cup. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. I want my artificial arm removed and attached to Hana instead." "Tai Wu, that is completely impossible," Li said, standing up from her desk. "The neural interfaces are calibrated specifically for your human brain patterns. Your prosthetic would never work on a Villani nervous system. It would be like trying to plug a human computer into an alien power source. But what if we modified it?" Tai Wu asked. "What if we changed the interfaces? What if we adapted the technology?" Li stared at him for a long moment. "You are talking about experimental surgery that has never been attempted before. Even if it was theoretically possible, which it probably is not, you would be giving up your own arm forever. There would be no going back." "I know," Tai Wu said simply, "but why?" Li asked. "Why would you do something so risky for someone you barely know?" Tai Wu thought about the question. He thought about watching Hana try to comfort other wounded people, even when she was dying. He thought about her talking about creating beauty from broken things. He thought about the way she never gave up hope, even when everything seemed hopeless. Because she needs it more than I do, he said finally. I am a soldier. I can adapt, I can learn to fight and work with one arm, but she is an artist. Without hands, she cannot create anything, and the galaxy needs her art more than it needs another one armed. Soldier. Lee sat back down heavily in her chair. This is insane, she said. But even as she said it, Tae-woo could see her mind working. She was thinking about the technical challenges, wondering if it might actually be possible. Let me run some scans, she said. Finally, I want to compare Vellani and human nervous systems. Maybe there are some similarities we have not noticed before, but I am not making any promises. This is probably going to be impossible for the next 2 days. Dr. Lee and her team ran every test they could think of. They scanned Hana's remaining neural pathways. They analyzed how human prosthetics connected to the nervous system. They even brought in engineer Park Dao-hyun from the ship's technical crew to examine the prosthetic itself. What they discovered surprised everyone. While Vellani and human brains were very different in most ways, there were some unexpected similarities in the areas that controlled fine motor skills. The pathways that allowed precise hand movements were structured in remarkably similar ways between the two species. It was still a huge risk. There were 100 things that could go wrong. The prosthetic might not respond to Vellani neural signals, it might cause nerve damage, it might even be rejected by her immune system. But for the first time, it seemed like there might be a chance. When they explained the plan to Hana, her reaction was immediate and emotional. Tears ran down her blue-scaled cheeks as she looked back and forth between Tae-woo and Dr. Lee. I cannot accept this, she said. You need your arm. I have already lost too much. I cannot take something so important from someone who has been so kind to me. Tae-woo knelt beside her bed so they were at the same eye level. Hana, he said gently. A good soldier knows when to fight and when to help others. This is my way of helping. My arm can save lives by letting you create beauty again. That makes me a better soldier, not a worse one. But what if it does not work? She asked. What if all this pain and risk is for nothing? Then we will have tried, Tae-woo said. And sometimes trying is the most important thing we can do. Hana looked at him for a long time, studying his face as if she was trying to memorize every detail. Finally, she nodded. If you are sure, she said, if you really want to do this, then I will try to be worthy of such a gift engineer. Park spent the next day modifying the prosthetic arm. Working with barely any sleep, he rebuilt the neural interface systems. He replaced circuits designed for human biology with new components that might work with Vellani nervous systems. He even had to invent entirely new connection protocols. Other crew members helped in whatever ways they could. Some donated spare electronic parts, others offered ideas for modifications. The entire ship seemed to be invested in making this impossible surgery work. The night before the operation, Tae-woo sat with Hana one last time as they both prepared for what was coming. Are you afraid? He asked. Yes, she said honestly. But I am also hopeful, and hope is stronger than fear. Tae-woo smiled. You sound like someone who will create beautiful things again. I hope so. She said, I want to make something that shows what humans are really like. Something that shows your kindness and courage. Tomorrow they would find out if human determination could overcome the laws of biology. The morning of the surgery came with an unusual quiet aboard the Soul Pride. Even the normal sounds of the ship seemed muted, as if everyone was holding their breath. Dr. Lee had been awake all night, double-checking every detail of the procedure. She had never attempted anything like this before, and the responsibility felt crushing. Tae-woo arrived at the medical bay early. His prosthetic arm would be removed first, then immediately prepared for attachment to Hana. The timing had to be perfect. If they waited too long, the artificial components might lose calibration. If they rushed, the modifications might not work properly. "Are you ready?" the doctor asked him as he lay down on the surgical table, as ready as anyone can be for something impossible. Tae-woo replied with a small smile. In the bed next to him, Hana was already prepared for her part of the surgery. She had been given medication to help her relax, but her golden eyes were bright and alert. When she saw Tae-woo looking at her, she managed a brave smile. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing this could work." The first part of the surgery was routine. Dr. Lee had removed prosthetic limbs before for repairs and upgrades. Within an hour, Tae-woo's artificial arm was disconnected and carefully transported to the engineering bay where Park Do-hyun was waiting. Park had been working non-stop for 3 days. His modifications to the prosthetic were extensive. He had replaced the neural interface completely, designing new circuits that could theoretically bridge the gap between human and Vellani biology. The power systems had been adjusted for Vellani body chemistry. Even the joint mechanisms had been fine-tuned for different muscle attachment points, but theory and practice were very different things. Nobody knew if any of it would actually work. While Park made his final modifications, Dr. Lee began the most delicate part of the procedure. Connecting the prosthetic to Hana's nervous system required mapping her remaining neural pathways with incredible precision. A single mistake could cause permanent damage to her brain. The surgery took 8 hours. Other crew members gathered in the hallways outside the medical bay, waiting for news. Captain Kim Soo-jin stopped by twice. To check on progress, Engineer Park brought coffee to the medical team and stayed to help with last-minute adjustments. Even aliens from other species who were patients on the ship seemed to understand that something important was happening. They spoke in whispers and offered quiet prayers in their own languages. Finally, Dr. Lee emerged from the surgical bay exhausted but hopeful. The prosthetic had been attached successfully. All the connections looked good, but the real test would come. When Hana woke up, Tae-woo was awake and alert, despite having his own surgery. His right arm moved normally, but where his left arm had been, there was now only empty space covered by bandages. It felt strange to be missing a limb again, but he had no regrets. "How do you feel?" Dr. Lee asked him. "Like I made the right choice," he said. "Where is Hana? How did it go?" "She is stable," Lee replied, "but we will not know if the prosthetic works until she regains consciousness. That should be in a few hours." Those were the longest hours anyone on the ship could remember. Crew members found excuses to walk past the medical bay, hoping for updates. Word had spread throughout the entire fleet that something unprecedented was being attempted on the Soul. Pride, finally. Hana's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused at first, trying to remember where she was and what had happened. Then she saw the artificial arm attached to her left shoulder, and her eyes grew wide. "Can you feel anything?" Dr. Lee asked gently. "Try not to move yet, but tell me what you sense." Hana concentrated her face, showing intense focus. At first, nothing happened. The prosthetic arm remained completely still. Everyone watching held their breath. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, one finger moved. Hana gasped in amazement. "I can feel it," she whispered. "It is not like my real arm was, but I can feel something." Over the next hour, she learned to control individual fingers. Each movement was careful and deliberate as her brain learned to communicate with the alien technology, but progress was steady and remarkable. Dr. Lee ran test after test, checking nerve responses, calibrating sensors, adjusting the interface protocols. Park hovered nearby, making minor modifications to improve the connection. The breakthrough moment came when Hana successfully picked up a plastic cup. She lifted it slowly, brought it to her lips, and took a sip of water. It was a simple action that healthy people did without thinking. But for Hana, it was like learning to walk again. The medical bay erupted in quiet cheers. Everyone had been afraid to hope too much, afraid that disappointment would be too crushing to bear. But now, watching Hana control her new artificial limb, it was impossible not to feel amazed. Tae-woo moved his chair closer to her bed. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange," she said honestly, "but wonderful. I thought I would never be able to touch anything again. Now I can feel the texture of this blanket. I can feel the warmth of your skin when I touch your hand." She reached out with her prosthetic fingers and gently touched his face. The sensors in the artificial skin sent signals through the modified neural pathways to her brain. Her expression was one of pure wonder. "This is incredible," she said. "I can feel that you need to shave. I can feel that your skin is warm. I can even feel that you are smiling." Dr. Lee was taking notes as fast as she could write. The implications of this success were enormous. If they could adapt human prosthetics, for Villani physiology, what other cross-species medical applications might be possible, but the most amazing discovery was yet to come. Over the following days, Hana's control of the prosthetic improved dramatically. She learned to write with it, to eat with it, to perform increasingly complex tasks. But when someone brought her a piece of clay to experiment with something extraordinary happened. Her artistic abilities had not just returned, they had been enhanced somehow. The combination of her natural Villani sensitivity with the precision controls of human military prosthetics created something entirely new. She could sculpt with a level of detail that would have been impossible with organic hands. The prosthetic allowed for microscopic adjustments that no biological limb could achieve. Within a week, she had created a small sculpture that left everyone who saw it speechless. It showed a human hand and a Villani hand clasped together, but the level of detail was incredible. Every line in the skin, every texture difference between the species, every emotion conveyed through the gesture was perfectly captured. News of the successful surgery spread quickly through the Galactic Alliance fleet. Other injured aliens began asking if similar procedures might be possible for them. Medical teams across the galaxy started collaborating on cross-species prosthetic research. But perhaps most importantly, the story gave hope to countless beings who had thought their lives were over after losing. Limbs in the war Hana became a symbol of what was possible when different species worked together to help each other. Her recovery inspired not just medical breakthroughs, but changes in how the various races of the galaxy thought about cooperation, and it all started with one human soldier deciding that someone else needed his arm more than he did. The war was still raging across dozens of star systems. People were still dying every day from violence and hatred. But aboard the Soul, pride something beautiful had been born from something broken. Just as Hana had predicted, beauty could always be created even from the most damaged pieces. 2 weeks had passed since the surgery, and Hana was recovering faster than anyone had expected. Her control over the prosthetic arm improved every single day. What had started as simple finger movements had grown into complex manipulations that amazed even Engineer Park, who had designed the modifications. Dr. Lee documented everything. She knew they were witnessing something that would change medicine across the galaxy. The successful integration of human prosthetic technology with Villani. Biology opened doors that nobody had even imagined before. But the most incredible moment was still to come. Tae-woo had adapted well to having only one arm. He relearned how to dress himself, how to handle his weapons, how to perform his duties as a soldier. The human body was remarkably good at adjusting to changes, and military training had taught him to overcome any obstacle. What he had not expected was how good it would feel to watch Hana discover new abilities every day. She could now write in both human and Villani languages. Her artificial hand moved with precision that her original hands had never possessed. The prosthetic sensors gave her feedback about pressure, temperature, and texture that was different from natural touch, but in some ways even more detailed. Other patients in the medical bay watched her progress with amazement. A Centauri trader who had lost his own arm in a different battle asked if human prosthetics might work for his species too. Dr. Lee was already making plans to find out, but it was when someone brought Hana a complete set of sculpting tools that everyone realized just how successful the surgery had truly been. The tools were made for human hands, but Hana adapted to them quickly. Her prosthetic fingers could grip the smallest detail, chisels, and apply exactly the right amount of pressure. The artificial limb never got tired, never cramped, never shook from exhaustion. She started with a simple piece of clay, just testing her abilities. But within hours, she was working on something more complex. Her artificial hand moved with incredible speed and precision, while her remaining natural hand provided support and guidance. What emerged from the clay was unlike anything anyone had seen before. The sculpture showed a human soldier carrying a wounded Villani in his arms. But the level of detail was extraordinary. Every scale on the Villani's skin was perfectly formed. Every piece of equipment on the soldier's uniform was accurate down to the smallest buckle. The expressions on both faces told a complete story. The soldier showed determination mixed with compassion. The Villani showed pain, but also trust and hope. The entire piece captured the moment when two different species connected. Across the barriers of biology and culture, Dr. Lee stared at the sculpture in amazement. "How is this possible?" she asked Hana. "Your control is better than most humans who have had prosthetics for years." Hana smiled and flexed her artificial fingers. "I think it is because my brain is different from human brains." She said Villani minds process sensory information in ways that your prosthetic was not designed for. But instead of making it not work, it makes it work better. She picked up a fine detail tool and began adding tiny textures to the sculpture. Her movements were so precise that she could carve individual hairs into the clay. Each strand was perfect. Each shadow was exactly right. Park watched her work with professional fascination. The prosthetic is performing beyond its design specifications, he said. The neural feedback loops are processing faster and more accurately than they ever did when Tae-Woo wore it. This discovery led to even more amazing developments over the following days. Researchers from across the fleet came to study Hana's case. They brought sophisticated scanning equipment to measure her brain activity while she used the prosthetic. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about cross-species. Biology Villani neural pathways were indeed very different from human ones, but in the areas that controlled fine motor skills and artistic creativity, they were actually superior. The prosthetic that had been designed for human efficiency was being enhanced by Villani neurological capabilities. The result was a hybrid system that combined the best aspects of both species. Human engineering precision merged with Villani artistic sensitivity to create abilities that neither species possessed alone. Word of these developments reached the highest levels of both human and Villani governments. Within days, diplomatic representatives were requesting visits to the Soul Pride. The implications went far beyond medical treatment. This success suggested that cooperation between species could produce results that nobody had imagined possible. But for Tae-Woo, the most important result was much simpler. He got to watch his friend discover that she could create beauty again. Hana worked for days on a new sculpture. This one was larger and more complex than anything she had attempted before. It showed representatives from dozens of different alien species all working together on some great project. The detail was incredible, but more than that, the piece conveyed a powerful message about unity and cooperation. Medical staff from other ships began requesting transfers to the Soul Pride just to observe Hana's recovery. Engineers wanted to study the prosthetic modifications. Artists from various species came to see her work. Diplomats arrived to discuss the political implications of successful cross-species medical cooperation. Through it all, Hannah remained humble and grateful. She spent hours each day helping other patients in the medical bay. Her artificial hand was perfect for delicate medical tasks, and her gentle personality made her popular with everyone, but she never forgot who had made her recovery possible. Every sculpture she created included some reference to human kindness. Often it was subtle. A hand extended in help, a figure standing guard over others, but the message was always clear. Humans had given her more than just an artificial limb. They had given her back her purpose, her identity, her ability to contribute to the galaxy. The success of Hannah's prosthetic led to requests from injured beings across the galaxy. Suddenly, every medical facility wanted to experiment with cross-species prosthetic research. The war had created thousands of casualties who had given up hope of ever living normal lives again. Now there was hope. Dr. Lee found herself coordinating with medical teams from dozens of different worlds. She was designing new modification protocols for various alien physiologies. The work that had started as one desperate attempt to help a single patient was becoming a new branch of medical science. Engineer Park was promoted and given his own research facility. He began designing prosthetics specifically intended for cross-species use. Instead of trying to modify existing human technology, but perhaps the most significant change was in how different species began to think about each other. The successful cooperation between human and Villani biology proved that the differences between races were not barriers to be overcome, but opportunities for creating something better. Ai Wu was reassigned to a new position as a liaison between human military forces and alien civilian populations. His experience with Hannah had given him insights into cross-species cooperation that made him valuable in diplomatic situations. His missing arm became a symbol of human willingness to sacrifice for others when aliens saw that he had voluntarily given up his prosthetic to help someone. From a different species, it changed how they thought about human motivations. The war continued, but something fundamental had shifted. The story of Tai Wu and Hannah spread throughout the galaxy, proving that cooperation could achieve things that conflict never could, and in medical facilities across known space-injured beings who had lost hope began to believe that they might create beauty from their broken pieces too. 3 months had passed since the surgery, and Hannah had become the most famous patient in the entire Galactic Alliance fleet. Her recovery was not just successful, it was miraculous. She could now control her prosthetic arm with precision that amazed even the engineers who had designed it. But nobody expected what happened next. Hannah was working on her largest sculpture, yet a piece that would tell the story of the war from the perspective of civilians caught in the fighting. As she carved intricate details into the stone, her prosthetic hand moved with impossible accuracy. Every line was perfect. Every surface was exactly as she intended. Dr. Lee watched through the medical bay window, still documenting every aspect of Hannah's progress. The research data they were collecting would help thousands of other patients across the galaxy. But even Lee was surprised by what she observed. Hannah was not just using the prosthetic like a tool. She had somehow integrated it so completely into her nervous system that it responded to thoughts she was not even conscious of having. When she imagined a texture, her artificial fingers would automatically adjust their grip. When she visualized a curve, her prosthetic hand would move to create it, before her conscious mind had decided to act. "This is impossible," Lee said to Engineer Park, who was reviewing the latest sensor readings. "The neural integration should not be this complete. Human prosthetics are not designed for this level of unconscious." Control Park shook his head in amazement. "Her brain has essentially rewired itself," he said. "The Villani neural pathways are adapting to the prosthetic faster than the prosthetic can adapt to them. She is creating new connections that we never thought possible." The implications were staggering. If other species could achieve similar integration levels, the entire field of prosthetic medicine would need to be revolutionized. But more than that, it suggested that the biological differences between species might actually be advantages rather than obstacles. News of Hana's progress reached the Villani homeworld, where government officials and medical researchers were fascinated by the developments. A delegation was dispatched to study her case and explore possibilities for broader cooperation with human medical technology. Meanwhile, other injured aliens throughout the fleet were requesting similar procedures. A Rigelian pilot who had lost both legs wanted to try human prosthetic technology. A Andromedan engineer who had lost an eye was interested in human optical implants. Each case required new research, new modifications, new surgical techniques. But the success with Hana had proven that cross-species prosthetic medicine was possible. The medical teams across the galaxy began working together in ways they never had before. Tae-Woo visited Hana every day, watching her create sculptures that seemed to grow more amazing with each passing week. Her latest piece showed the Soul Pride, floating in space, but every detail of the ship was perfect. Every window, every antenna, every hull plate was exactly right. She had never seen the outside of the ship while awake, yet somehow she had captured its appearance with total accuracy. How? "Did you know what the ship looked like from outside?" Tae-Woo asked. "I asked the computer for images," she said simply. "But also I can feel the ship around us. My prosthetic senses, vibrations from the engines, harmonics from the hull metal. The ship has a signature that I can detect through touch." This revelation led to another breakthrough. Hana's enhanced sensory capabilities were not just helping her create art. They were giving her information about her environment that nobody had expected. Could detect structural weaknesses in metal by touching it. She could sense electronic malfunctions by feeling the vibrations they created. She could even identify different types of materials just by contact with her prosthetic hand. The ship's engineers began consulting with her about mechanical problems. Her artificial touch could locate issues that their instruments missed. She became an unofficial diagnostic specialist, helping to maintain the Soul Pride in ways that nobody had anticipated. But perhaps the most remarkable development was in her artistic abilities. Hana began creating sculptures that incorporated both organic and technological elements. She would carve traditional Villani patterns into metal salvaged from damaged ships. The combination was beautiful in ways that nobody had seen before. Her work began to influence other artists across the galaxy. Humans started experimenting with Villani techniques, while Villani artists began incorporating human materials and tools. The cultural exchange was creating entirely new forms of artistic expression. Museums on dozens of worlds began requesting examples of Hana's hybrid art style. Her sculptures became symbols of successful cooperation between different species. They were displayed at peace negotiations and diplomatic meetings as proof that unity could create beauty. The medical breakthroughs continued as well. Dr. Lee published research papers that revolutionized prosthetic medicine. Her work with cross-species, neural integration became required, reading in medical schools throughout known space. New facilities were established specifically for cross-species prosthetic research. Injured beings who had given up hope began traveling from across the galaxy, seeking treatment. The waiting lists were months long, but for people who had thought their productive lives were over, any wait was worthwhile. Engineer Park found himself leading a team of researchers from dozens of different worlds. They were designing prosthetics specifically intended for cross-species use instead of adapting existing technology. Each new device incorporated lessons learned from Hana's case. The success rate was remarkable. Not every procedure worked perfectly, but the vast majority of patients experienced significant improvements in their quality of life. Some achieved integration levels approaching Hana's, others gained basic functionality that allowed them to live independently again. But the impact went far beyond individual patients. The success of the cross-species prosthetic program began to change how different races thought about cooperation. Military leaders started wondering what other technologies might be improved through interspecies collaboration. Scientists began sharing research that had previously been kept secret. Engineers started working on joint projects that combined the best capabilities of multiple worlds. Diplomats found themselves negotiating cooperation agreements instead of just peace. Treaties. The war was still happening. Battles were still being fought and people were still dying. But something fundamental had shifted in how the galaxy approached problems. Instead of each species working alone, they began to see the advantages of combining their different strengths. Tae-Woo was promoted again and given command of an entire interspecies cooperation unit. His job was to identify opportunities for the kind of collaboration that had made Hana's recovery possible. He traveled throughout the fleet, meeting with representatives from dozens of different worlds. His missing left arm was immediately recognized by everyone he met. They all knew the story of the human soldier who had given his prosthetic to help an alien artist. That recognition opened doors that had been closed for centuries. Species that had never trusted humans began to listen to his proposals for cooperation. Worlds that had been isolated began to participate in joint research projects. But for Tae-Woo, the most important result was still watching Hana continue to create incredible art. Her latest sculpture was her masterpiece, a massive work that told the entire history of the current war, but from the perspective of hope instead of conflict. It showed beings from every known species working together to build something beautiful from the wreckage of battle. The piece was installed in the central plaza of Galactic Alliance headquarters, where it served as a constant reminder that cooperation could triumph over conflict. The sculpture became a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy who came to see proof that their differences could be strengths rather than weaknesses. And at the base of the sculpture, in letters carved in dozens of different languages, was a simple inscription: "Beauty can always be created even from broken things." The smoke was everywhere. Kim Tae-Woo could not see more than 10 feet ahead of him. His military boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal as he walked through what used to be Kepler Station trading post. The smell of burned electronics and something much worse filled his nose. Just 3 hours ago, this place had been alive with traders from dozens of different worlds. Now it looked like a graveyard. The Sec Empire had hit this station hard and fast. They did not care who got hurt, as long as they could destroy anything that helped the Galactic Alliance. Tae-Woo limped badly. His left leg had taken shrapnel during the battle, but he was still alive. That was more than he could say for many others. Bodies of different alien species lay scattered around him. Some he recognized. Some he did not. All of them were still and silent. He should have been heading back to his ship. The Soul Thunder was waiting for survivors like him. But something made him stop. Something that sounded like a very quiet voice calling for help. The voice came from under a huge piece of twisted metal that used to be part of the station's roof. Tae-Woo knelt down and tried to see what was underneath. He could barely make out a shape that looked like it might be alive. "Help me, please," the voice said in broken human language. It was soft and musical, like wind chimes. Tae-Woo grabbed the edge of the metal beam. It was heavy, much heavier than he expected. His injured leg screamed in pain, but he managed to lift it just enough to see what was trapped underneath. What he saw made his heart stop beating for a moment. A young female alien lay there looking up at him with the biggest golden eyes he had ever seen. Her skin was covered in small blue scales that shimmered even in the dim light. She was clearly from the Vellani species, the peaceful artists and traders who never hurt anyone. But that was not what made Tae-Woo freeze in shock. Both of her arms were gone. Where her arms should have been there were only torn, bloody stumps at her shoulders. The metal beam had crushed them completely. There was purple blood everywhere, the color that Vellani people bled. Most humans would have looked away. Most would have been sick. Tae-Woo had seen terrible things in the war, but this was different. This was not a soldier who knew the risks. This was an innocent person whose only crime was being in the wrong place when the Sec Empire decided to attack. "Please do not leave me," she whispered. Her voice was so quiet he almost could not hear it over the sounds of distant explosions. Tae-woo looked into those golden eyes and saw something that surprised him. Most aliens were terrified when they saw a human soldier, especially one covered in battle armor. And carrying weapons, humans had a reputation across the galaxy as fierce fighters who never backed down from a fight. But this Villani woman was not afraid of him. She was hurt and dying, but she looked at him with hope, not fear. "I will not leave you," Tae-woo said as he carefully moved the metal beam away from her body. "My name is Tae-woo. What is yours?" "Hana," she said. "I am called Hana Tai-woo." Pulled his medical kit from his backpack, his hands moved quickly as he had been trained. Pressure bandages, to stop the bleeding pain medication, to help her hurt less emergency nutrients to keep her body working. As he worked on her injuries, he noticed how brave she was. Most people would be screaming or crying or begging, but Hana just watched him work. Sometimes she would close her eyes tight when the pain got really bad, but she never made a sound. There was something else that amazed him. Even though she was badly hurt and probably going to die, Hana kept looking around at the other bodies scattered nearby. When she saw movement from another injured alien, she would call out to them in her musical language. Her voice was gentle and comforting, like a mother talking to a scared child. "Why are you trying to help others when you are hurt so badly?" Tae-woo asked, as he wrapped bandages around her shoulder stumps. "Because they are afraid," she said simply. "When people are afraid and hurt, they need to know someone cares. Someone needs to tell them they are not alone." Tae-woo had been fighting in this war for 3 years. He had seen the worst that different species could do to each other. He had watched entire planets burn. He had lost friends and fellow soldiers. He thought he understood what this war was really about, but sitting there in the ruins of Kepler Station, listening to this armless Villani woman try to comfort strangers even while she was dying, Tae-woo realized he had been wrong about many things. The war was not just about territory or resources or political power. It was about what kind of galaxy they were all going to live in. Would it be a place where the strong destroyed the weak, where people only cared about their own species, where fear and hatred decided everything, or could it be something better? Hana tried to move. Closer to a wounded trader from another species, but without arms, she could barely shift her position. Tae-woo saw the frustration in her eyes, not because she could not help herself, but because she could not help others. "What did you do before the war?" Tae-woo asked, as he helped her into a more comfortable position. "I was a sculptor," she said with pride in her voice. "I made statues that told stories, stories about my people and our history. I used my hands to show others what beauty could look." Like Tae-woo felt something cold settle in his stomach. Sculptors needed their hands. The way singers needed their voices without arms, Hana would never create art again. She would need help with everything, eating, drinking, even the most basic personal needs. She would go from being an independent artist to being completely dependent on others for the rest of her life. But as he looked at her face, he saw no self-pity, no anger, no bitterness. She was sad, yes, but there was still something bright and unbroken in those golden eyes. "We need to get you to a medical ship." Tae-woo said, "Can you travel if I carry you?" "I think so," she said. "But what about the others? There are still people alive under some of this wreckage." Tae-woo looked around at the destruction. There might be a few other survivors, but his ship would leave soon. The longer they stayed here, the more likely it was that Sec forces would return to finish what they started. He made a choice that went against his military training. Instead of leaving immediately, he and Hana spent the next hour searching for other survivors. They found 3 more aliens who were still alive. 2 were injured badly, but could be saved. 1 was dying, but they made sure he did not die alone. when they finally made their way to the Soul Thunder Tie. Wu was carrying Hana in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, but he could feel the strength in her spirit. It was like carrying a small sun that refused to stop shining even in the darkest place as the medical ship lifted off from the destroyed station. Hana looked out the window at the ruins below. So much beauty destroyed, she said quietly. But some beauty survives, and new beauty can always be created even from broken things. Tai Wu did not know it yet, but those words would change everything. 1 year had passed since that day in the ruins of Kepler Station. Tai Wu stood in the central plaza of New Geneva Station, looking up at Hana's masterpiece sculpture. The massive artwork dominated the space, showing beings from every known species, working together to build something beautiful from the wreckage of war. Hundreds of people moved through the plaza every day. Humans, Villani, Rigelians, Centauri, and dozens of other species, all stopping to admire the sculpture that had become a symbol of hope across the galaxy. Many touched the base where Hana's inscription was carved in multiple languages. Beauty can always be created even from broken things. Tai Wu smiled as he read the words again. He had heard them first in the medical bay, of the soul pride spoken by a wounded alien who refused to give up hope. Now they were known throughout the galaxy, quoted by diplomats, referenced in peace treaties carved into monuments on dozens of worlds. The changes that had started with one impossible surgery had spread far beyond anyone's expectations. Behind him, footsteps approached on the plaza stones. Tai Wu turned to see Hana walking toward him. Her prosthetic left arm moved naturally as she carried a small sculpture in her right hand. She had grown more confident over the past year, her golden eyes bright with purpose and creativity. "Good morning, my friend," she said in perfect human language. Her accent was musical, but her grammar was flawless. She had become fluent in 7 different galactic languages over the past year. "Good morning," Tai Wu replied. "How is the new piece coming along?" She held up the small sculpture she had been carrying. It showed 2 figures, a human and a Villani, standing back to back as if protecting each other. The detail work was incredible. But more than that, the piece conveyed a powerful sense of trust and mutual support. "It is almost finished," she said. "I am calling it Partnership. This piece will be the centerpiece for the new interspecies medical center that opens next month." The Interspecies Medical Center was one of dozens of facilities that had been built following the success of Hana's surgery. Located on the neutral world of Harmony Station, it would provide cross-species prosthetic treatment for injured beings from across the galaxy. Dr. Lee had been appointed as the first director. She now led a team of medical professionals from 15 different worlds, working together to develop new treatments that combined the best knowledge from multiple species. The center was already fully booked for its first 2 years of operation. Patients were traveling from the farthest reaches of known space-seeking treatment that had been impossible before Hana proved it could work. But medical advances were only part of the changes that had spread across the Galaxy Engineer Park, now directed the Interspecies Technology Institute, where researchers from dozens of worlds collaborated on projects that would have been unthinkable. Just a year earlier, they were developing communication systems that worked across species barriers, transportation technology that accommodated different physiologies and manufacturing processes that combined the best techniques from multiple civilizations. The results were extraordinary. Spacecraft that were faster and more efficient than anything built by a single species. Communication devices that could translate not just languages, but concepts that were unique to different cultures. Manufacturing systems that could produce goods tailored for the specific needs of various alien physiologies. But perhaps the most significant change was in how different species thought about each other. The war between the Galactic Alliance and the Sec Empire had not ended with a dramatic battle or peace treaty. Instead, it had gradually transformed as more and more worlds chose cooperation over conflict. The Sec Empire found it increasingly difficult to recruit allies as species after. Species decided that working together produced better results than fighting. Several former Sec worlds had switched sides after seeing the benefits of interspecies cooperation. The economic advantages alone were enormous. When different species shared their technologies and knowledge, the resulting innovations benefited everyone. Tae-woo had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new interspecies cooperation fleet. His ships carried diplomats, scientists, engineers, and medical personnel to worlds throughout the galaxy, spreading the message that cooperation was more powerful than conflict. His missing left arm had become famous throughout known space. The story of the human soldier who gave his prosthetic to help an alien artist was told in schools on hundreds of worlds. Children from dozens of different species learned about the day when one person's kindness changed everything. But Tae-woo had received something in return. His new prosthetic was even more advanced than his original. It had been designed by the Interspecies Technology Institute using knowledge from multiple worlds. The artificial limb was stronger, more sensitive, and more capable than any purely human technology. More importantly, he had gained something that could not be replaced, the knowledge that he had helped create something beautiful and lasting. His decision to help Hana had started changes that were still spreading across the galaxy. The plaza around them began to fill with the mourning crowd. Tae-woo watched as beings from different worlds stopped to admire Hana's sculpture. Some took pictures, others made sketches. A group of young humans and Villani were working together on their own small artwork, clearly inspired by what they saw. "This is what I hoped for when I first started creating, again," Hana said, following his gaze. Art that inspires people to work together instead of fight against each other. She had become more than just an artist. Her recovery had made her a symbol of what was possible when different species helped each other. Museums across the galaxy displayed her work. Universities invited her to speak about cross-species cooperation. Diplomatic missions requested her presence at important negotiations. But she remained humble and focused on her art. Each piece she created told a story about unity, cooperation, and the beauty that could emerge from the most broken situations. The morning news reports were full of stories that would have been impossible. A year earlier, a joint human-Villani research team had developed a new faster-than-light communication system. A Rigelian Centauri engineering project had created revolutionary medical scanners. 3 former Sec worlds had officially joined the Galactic Alliance. Each development could be traced back in some way to the success of the cross-species prosthetic program. The proof that different species could work together to achieve impossible things had inspired cooperation in every field. Of Endeavor wars were ending not through conquest, but through the simple realization that cooperation produced better results than conflict. Trade agreements were being replaced by research partnerships. Military alliances were evolving into cultural exchange programs. The galaxy was becoming a fundamentally different place, Tae.